tradition, a very long tradition in art to capture still lifes. And really what it's about, it's this idea of capturing something that is still, it's a moment in time. The French way of saying still life, and I won't attempt it because I don't speak French, is basically nature morte, so dead nature. So it's this idea of something that is caught in a moment of time. The flowers will die in a few days. It's that thing that's it's there. It's sort of in the moment. It's very good for practicing painting. It's quite a challenging subject to complete. But really, it's quite fun. I like painting still lifes. I don't paint as many as I would like to. And a lot of that it's about how you set it up. You want to get the lighting perfect for a still life. You want to have good subject matter. This photograph I took off the internet, and the lighting is already perfect in it. Now, when we go to paint a still life, and I've done this with a few of you before, we want to start out by painting extremely thin, just to sort of sketch out our basic composition. So to do that with our three primary colours, and I'll just show you actually the brush I'm going to use for this. Now, because I want to do it thin, I'm using a thin round brush. My normal round brush that I use for most of these is that size. So you can see the difference there. Now, if you don't have a finished round brush like this, you can use pretty much any brush. You can use a flat brush like this if you use the side, anything really. So really we want the smallest brush possible, but not tiny, around about that size. And when I start painting still life, I never draw. It's a painting and not a drawing. If I draw a still life, and I used to, what I end up doing is kind of colouring in the areas afterwards inside the drawing. But the way I do it is to feel it out, to feel the composition out with paint. The first colour we want to use to get this down is going to be a mix of our three primary colours here. I'm going to start by making an orange. So I've got my yellow, and into it I just put a tiny bit of red, a little bit more, to create this orange. And I don't want it too yellow. So that's about right for me as an orange. I'm not going to start with this orange because it's way too strong. So what I'm going to do to tone that orange down is add in a little bit of its complementary colour, which is blue. So that's where we're using all three colours. And I'm just mixing that blue into my orange there. You can see automatically it tones it down and makes it much more earthy. I'm going to add some more blue to it because I want to make it earthier still, almost a brown colour. So there it is. That's close to what I want. When we buy paints, we can buy these colours, these earth colours. You know, it's anywhere between raw sienna, yellow ochre, burnt umber, burnt sienna. Okay, now I'm just going to add a touch more red to that to make it a bit more to the orangey side. It doesn't matter too much about getting this absolutely perfect, as long as you've got a kind of a browny type colour. If you find that it's turned green or heading towards green, just add a little bit more red to it, and that will bring it back round to a browny orange. Right. So now I've got this pile of colour here. I'm going to wet my brush and just take a little bit of the colour on the end of it. I really want it very, very, very light. I'll show you on a test piece of paper how light I want it. So can you see it's just a very, very faint wash. If I put too much on there, that's too strong. So the way I thin it down and make it lighter is just to add more water, like so. So now I've got that, I want to start and define the shape of the vase, as that's the most important part of getting the composition right. And we don't have to get it right the first time. We can sort of do lines around it. So I'm just going to look at where my vase is in the picture, and it's kind of round about here. And I'm just going to lightly draw the vase shape in. I'm always looking at the height of it and the width of it as well. And again, we don't want to get it absolutely perfectly because it always needs adjustment. Even no matter how well we draw or paint it, it will always need a little bit of adjustment. Okay. So I've got a basic shape there. I can see I've probably made it too large. I've got a gap here and a smaller gap here and a larger gap here. But again, I don't really care about it because this is much more of an impression that we're trying to do. And what I want to do as well is also to try and mark out where my basic shapes of my flowers are. I want to do them very, very lightly. And you see, I'm not actually trying to draw the flowers exactly, but just get a loose position for them. So you see there, I've just kind of marked out where my flowers will be. What we want to do now is to then look at where our leaves are going to be. And apologies if this isn't coming up very well on the camera because it's very light. But we want to go in now, and when we look at our leaves, rather than drawing them perfectly, we're just looking at the kind of the shapes that they create as a whole. So again, you can see, I hope you can see on the screen that I've really used a very light touch with both the wash of the colour and also with the marks that I'm making. They're just marking out where I will want to add some more colour. Now what we're going to do now is just to start to fill in a bit of the background. The lines that we have around our vase, and my vase will get smaller, we're going to take this colour basically and make it all here. So what will be left is the white inside of the vase. I'll give a demonstration now. So I've still got my colour here. If you've run out of it, I'll show you how to mix it again. So it was yellow with a touch of red in there to make an orange. And then into the orange. Well, yeah. Blue. It turns it into this kind of earthy, little bit of a delay on my zoom stream. So I've got quite close to that initial colour. Now with my larger brush, I am going to look at filling in the edges, the sides around this, and hopefully on the camera screen then you will see much more definition. Now to do this I want to add a little bit more blue to my mix, just to darken it slightly again. And very, very thin paint once more. We don't want it too saturated. I'm going to bring it right up to the edge of my vase. And try and wash some of this colour in. We won't go around where the flowers and leaves are just now, but we're just focusing on this curve around the vase and the area around here. And on to the other side as well. Now there is on the vase this little handle as well that we can barely see. So I'm just going to mark in an area for that and go around it. By filling in the what we call negative space. So you can create objects by filling in a colour around them. Now, we want to take this up and around our flowers as well. But first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to use the paint a little bit thinner this time, just to create a bit of difference and variety in the background. Just loosely go around where I marked where the flowers would be. Again, it's very light and you probably can't see it very well on the camera, but I hope you get the gist of what we're doing. Okay, so here we've got this very light, washy kind of shape that's being defined by the colour that's around it. We're going to start to add a bit more definition now to all of the areas. I'm going to start by first looking at our background in the painting. And I can see that there's some quite dark shadow areas in there. Now, what I want to do is to make my mix here, which is still workable because it's gouache, watercolour would be the same, is I'm going to add some more blue again to it to really darken that tone. And it's getting closer to a kind of a black colour now, but that's what I'm looking for. And I want to look on my photograph, and this still life is quite different because of the lighting. Often it's very clear to see a shadow coming. Here the shadow is quite long, so it's over in this corner here, but we're going to treat it as if it starts around here. So I'm just taking this darker colour just at the bottom of where my vase is. And I want to sort of drag it out a little bit over here. Take a bit more of that colour. And just in the bottom, again create that dark shadow. Now up in the top corner of the picture, there is as well this kind of shadow area that's coming over here. So just taking a light wash again. Over, create a sense of and I'll use a wet brush just to okay, so hopefully in your painting now, you'll have something that looks similar to this. It really is just the outline in negative space of the still life that we want to do. And next thing is we can actually start putting some green in because it's the darkest colour in here, and it will really help us to create the sense of what we're painting, to give it some structure. So I'm just going to wipe away my colours here. And we want to create a nice green. I think, though, the first thing I'm going to do before I do that is on our vase is just create a very subtle pinky kind of grey wash to go on there to give it a bit of definition, because I don't want to do that once I've put the green on top of it. So I'm going to take a touch of blue and a touch of red as well. Now we want this really watered down, and try not to mix the two colours up too much, that you have them kind of very loose like this. On my test paper, just test how thin it is. Can you see how washed out that is there? But it's very, very light. That's what it's doing. So if I look at my vase, the light is on this side, over here on the right-hand side. So I want to create the kind of shadow or the three dimensions starting darker here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to take some of this light grey colour and just slowly add it to the vase. Just on this side only. And then rinse my brush out and just take the edge of it and try and blend it over to this side. Leave it in that light. We'll be using on top of this a little bit of tone and colour in there. Right, so the next thing we'll do is adding not get caught up with trying to get them perfect. We want to try and just create an impression of leaves. The first thing we'll do is make a green. Yeah. And a bit of blue. Dark. Add some more blue to that yellow. And a bit more blue. It's getting close to what we want. Okay. Now to make it slightly more natural again, we're going to rely a little bit on complementary colours. So red and green are complementary colours. But when you green or vice versa, rather than complementing it, it actually cancels it out. But what it's doing for us, it's taking that green, which is still quite vivid, and making it slightly more natural, slightly more toned down. But you only want the small amount of red in Right. Again, this won't be the perfect colour. We'll give it a go. Now here I'm going to go back to my small brush, and I'm going to work very light and fluid again with quite a bit of water on my brush. And I want to look where my leaves are, and rather than focusing on detail, is to look at shapes. And just by putting my brush down, just slowly add some areas of green. We can go back and refine them afterwards. And what's nice about working in a watercolor way to start with is you can create the kind of the darks and lights, the tones and stuff. It starts to become tricky but here we're just trying to mark where some of our leaves are. And you see I'm kind of working around and doing different bits at different times rather than sort of working left to right or right to left. Just putting those loose marks in for the leaves. You see, for just brush marks of laying your brush flat or moving it side to side, that you can sort of create these suggestions of leaves. A lot of it is about letting go of the idea of trying to capture the interpret, which is paint, the real life own language, the stillness, but the language that we're using, special way of speaking. And make sure you leave some gaps in between the leaves as well, because the flowers have got to go on top. We'll use white paint when it comes to the flowers, but there are also these areas back through. So I can come back to the leaves a little bit later and start to add some darker and lighter to them. I think what we want to do now is go back, and I'm looking at the shape of my vase, and I'm not too happy with it, but I think a lot of that is to do with it just looks like a white space in the paper. It doesn't have any definition to it. I think one way of creating that definition is going to be by adding the blue at the bottom to kind of round that bottom off and give it a little bit of sense of dimension and colour. We can see two that I'm using, which is ultramarine blue. I'm going to take some of that ultramarine blue, and I want to just add just the tiniest amount of white to it, not too much. And again with my small brush, I'm wanting the paint nice and thin. So I'm going to just try and round the bottom of this vase off, like so. Probably a little bit too light, so add some more blue in there. Touch of water. And you can see I've made it a little bit too wide, so just with a wet brush, I'm going to try and bring some of that down into the shadow. And again, it's something that needs really working and shaping, but I'm happy I've put a blue line in there anyway. It's by adding these bits that you start to see where your painting needs to go and what needs work. So I think what we will do is now look at trying to work that vase in. I still think though that the background around it is a little bit too light, so it's not letting it have its real shape. So I'm going to try and define it by the background, and even if we're departing a little bit from what we see in the background here, the key is using it to our advantage. Sometimes in paintings we have to take these little creative decisions to benefit us. Again, photography is very different to painting. So I'm going to try and make a darker colour to go around the vase. And to do that, I'm going to take some yellow and add into the yellow a touch of red to make this orange. Now I'm going to take some blue, quite a bit of blue, and mix it in there to try and create a much darker brown. I could see it turning slightly green, so the solution for that is to add some more red. Right, so I put some more red in there to create this much kind of deeper orangey brown. Now I'm going to see if by using this I'm able to define my shape a little bit better. So I'm going around the vase again on the outside. Just want this to wash this colour over here. A little bit more water in there. Again, where the shadow is that little bit darker. I want to bring this colour up as well because I'm preempting what's going to happen when we start to put the white of the flowers down. That the background's too light for the white to show up on there. So I'm kind of just going in again and washing a darker element around, trying to leave the gaps where they were before for the flowers to go in. You can see by having that dark now, it's given much more shape to our still life. Still want to fill in some more areas. Again, it's one of the benefits of working thin, that you're able to go over stuff relatively easy. I want to very carefully just go in between where I put some of the leaves, so it's matching the background. I'm trying to knock out some of that lighter white colour, because the brightest colour we're going to want is the white of the flowers and the white of the vase. Even if you go over some of your leaves, it doesn't matter. I've just added a bit more blue to that mix. You can see that line I'm able to define across there, which gives again a little sense of it being within a three-dimensional space. We'll use some of that as well for the shadow. Okay, so I think what's best to do now is that we take a 5-10 minute break and just let the painting settle down. We put some key elements into it, and once this layer has dried slightly, what we'll do is start to bring in some white and some opaque colours. I'm just going to add to this side here a bit of that darker shadow colour. As you can see with the still life, it's quite different to painting a landscape. That here I'm being much more considered about what I'm doing, about the light and the tone and the shade. And in particular with this painting, because we want to save our lightest and brightest colours for the flowers. So we're kind of having to work in a slightly different way. But what we will do is let that settle down and dry a little bit. We'll have a bit of a break and come back at, what time is it now? So it's 10:47. If we come back at 10:55 and we can continue. All right, so see you all soon. Hi everyone. So I'm back. Has anybody got any questions before we continue? No? No worries if not. What I'll do is continue, and what we'll do next is start getting some opacity in there. So that basically means using white to try and really give some light and definition to areas. The first thing we'll do is actually add a little bit of white into a mix to do the background as well, to take out some of the intensity of the colour there and flatten it down. And then we'll go on to the vase and then start adding some flowers to it. So I'll make the screen big again. And there we go. So where we left it off, we were working very much in washes to create a basic composition. Next thing we're going to do is to really try and both flatten things down and to raise things up as well. Looking for my other brush. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to again look at my background and try and create a more opaque background. Now to make things opaque, we just add white. Normally with watercolour, you don't use white, but with gouache, you do. So to create a kind of a browny grey background, again, I'm going to take some yellow and mix into the yellow some red to create an orange. And then into that, I'm going to add some blue to create this dark colour. Now that's, again, leaning a bit towards green. So to remedy that, I will add some more red into it. And I need a touch more blue now. And that's close to the colour I want, kind of a nice grey colour. Now into this mix, I'm going to now add a bit of white, but I'm not going to mix it all in. I'm just going to start in one corner and add it in. You can see it's made a grey almost instantly. Now this time, whilst I still want my paint to be relatively fluid, I don't want it as wet as watercolour. So you can see I can work it, but it's not completely soaking. And I'm going to see how that then looks. You can see the difference already. I've just put one brush mark on top of there, and it's already made it opaque. Now, my brush marks over my surface now are going to be these short kind of scrubbing motions that I'm creating. So I'm just dragging it over. I still want some of the undercolour to come through. So I'm just dragging that brush over the surface. And again, I can help define the shape of my bars there. Now you can see that's made it so much darker already. So what we're going to do is have some lighter aspects of it. I'm adding some more white into that mix. And a touch more water. Again, just trying to scrub that into the surface. Right up into the edge of the vase. Again, I'm going to add some more white to the mix. just over on this side as well. Drag some over the surface. And what this does, it blocks out the light of the paper beneath. And now all of the light will come from how much white we add to our mixes. Now, as we go up into this area here, I want it slightly lighter, and I'm just going to drag my brush over the surface like that to create a kind of a broken effect. We could work forever on getting the background right, but it's I've got to speed up a little bit. So just going to add some elements in around here. And I'll put here as well. And it doesn't matter if it goes over your leaves. Just going to rinse my brush out, try and get most of the colour out of it, and then over the background, just the areas, do a light wash. I want to unify certain elements of the background just with this wet brush. And for the time being, that will do for the background. And I just want to add a little bit more dark over in this corner. The background's important. It's kind of it's the backdrop basically. Don't want to spend too much time there. So the next place I want to go is back to my vase. Again, it's looking too much just like a white ball at the moment. So we're going to try and add a bit of 3-dimension to it. And for this, we're going to use, rather than white, we're going to use a kind of a blue-grey. So to make that colour, I'm going to take some blue to start with, and into it add just a touch of red. So I made this nice violet colour here, a very light violet. Into that, I'm going to take violet's complementary, which is yellow. So when they're together or next to each other, they complement each other. But when I mix that yellow into the violet, it creates this lovely grey colour. And I really want to tone this down a bit using white. And I want it to, here where my mix is, create a kind of a gradient. So I've gone from my darkest colour here, a little bit of white here, a little bit more white here, and then a bit more white there, like so. And here I'm going to start to define my vase. It's got a couple of different types of shadows. There's shadows from the lighting, but shadows also coming from the leaves. But I'm going to put this dark colour in now, and even though it looks a little bit too dark, as we start to add lighter colours to it, it will start to blend it out very nicely. So I definitely need some more white in there. And just trying to blend this lighter colour across over to this edge. You can see the difference between the white of the paper now, and now as we add this whitey grey colour to it. We'll take some more white. And starting over here, and just bring this around. Taking it up as high as I can into where the leaves are. And we can really help now define our edges of the vase just with this white and grey. You can get a much cleaner, rounded edge. Very subtle, that mix between the grey and the white. It's hard to see it on the camera. Now what I'm going to do is, if you look on the vase, it's got this little detail of kind of a blue-ish flower, and into the white, what I'm going to do is just add a bit of a design, because it helps us sort of create that sense of three dimension again. It's got some little bits of green and pink in it as well. Okay, I've just added those little touches to it. Probably work on that a bit more. But for the time being, again, I'm going to just try and create a bit more shadow under these leaves. Right. Now we'll come back to the vase and all other aspects. But again, like with all paintings, we tend to work on building the layers bit by bit. And then as soon as we put a new section in or a new piece, it automatically helps us see where else needs some work and some attention. I'm going to start to put the flowers in now. And I think it's important to do that because it'll really give us a gauge of the light and the dark and where we're at. Now for this, I'm going to use a brush with no water on at all. And I'm going to start with one flower. Now I've put some white out here. I've got two whites here. This white is a very fluid, liquidy white, and it's cheap. That's about £10 for this big bottle, which with gouache is quite cheap. However, it's not as strong as this white that I put out there, which is out of a tube. So I've put the white out of a tube and I want it as pure white as possible. And with my dry brush, I just want to coat the end of my brush with this white straight out of the tube. I'm going to test on this test card to see the kind of brush marks that I can make with it on top of there. So I don't know if you can see, there's just a little brush mark down. I'm going to use those brush marks to create the petals of the flower. And that will help gauge the light and the dark of our painting. So I'm going to look at this flower here and try and work out its position again. And with a bold brush stroke, I'm just going to make one mark there. Hopefully that is showing up on the screen. And next I'm going to do another there, like so. And another there. One there. There. Right. So that's the basis for the first flower. In the centre of the flower, we've got this yellowy kind of colour, which then goes to green in the centre. So I'm still using my small brush. And we'll take this yellow here, and just in the centre, again, I'm not trying to describe what I see perfectly. I'm just through brush marks, just making a little mark. So I created that light yellow there in the centre. And now I want to just do a touch of green. So I've taken the yellow and I'm going to add some blue into that. And then just with the tip of my brush, right in the centre of where I put the yellow, let's just do one little mark with the brush. Now I'm looking at that flower in proportion to the rest of the painting, and I think the flower needs to be slightly bigger. So I'm going to go back into my white here with that dry brush and just over my first petal, just add another brush mark, then again over the second, now by putting that in, what it's telling me automatically is that the things around it aren't dark enough. So the green isn't dark enough. And that's what you find with painting, that you put one thing in and something jumps out immediately. But I'm going to continue putting the flowers in, and then I'm going to adjust the green afterwards. So I'm looking now at this flower over here on the furthest right, lower right. And again, you just want to look at the basic shape of it to try and define it. So I'm doing one stroke there for a petal, another there, shorter one there, and one down there, short one there. It still doesn't seem big enough, so I'm going to try and extend some of these petals. Going with the yellow. Do a little mark in the centre. And a bit of green as well. We could come back and, of course, look at the flowers and give them more definition as we go along. Now I'm going to come over, right over this side, and look at this one. Nice big brush stroke. And whilst I'm here with the white, I'll put this one in too. Do that one up there. A couple at the back. Now taking the yellow again, I'm going to go into the centre of this one. And this one too. And then just add almost like a dot in the middle of it. Now the things that are standing out to me again is my vase isn't shaped very well, but my flowers are kind of lost. The brightness of them is completely lost, and that's a combination of the background, but also the lack of intensity in the green that's surrounding them. So the next step, I think, is to get a stronger green and to try and get a bit more definition. I can see there's also some stalks in there as well, which would be good to get in. But first of all, we'll focus on making the green a little bit more defined. So to do that, what I'm going to do is take some yellow and then add in some blue. A little bit more blue. Spread some water on the painting. Right. So now I've got this darker green, I really want to have a look at some of these areas where the leaves are. I'm going to put a touch of red into that green just to make it slightly earthier. A touch more blue too. So when I look at the leaves, I want to be looking where the darkest areas are. And in very similar brushstrokes as we used with the flowers, I'm going to try and just put some darker touches to that. You can see automatically just how much darker that is. What that does then, it will help the lighter colours come through and shine through. So again, I'm not focusing at this stage on getting every detail of the leaves. I'm just looking at the shapes of them and where they are in relation to everything else. I need to add just a touch of white to that so it's not too dark. Looking at these leaves here too. You see the difference when you start adding more opaque paint into the painting. Very easy to feel like you're sort of losing control of it at this point. But a lot of it is just persevering with it and adding those tones over the top of what you have already. And once it starts filling the painting up, things start to become much clearer. Some of these leaves really catching the light as well. And here I'm using it's almost like a dry brush over those bits that we done earlier. I'm dragging the brush over it to help give it that sense of definition. looking at it, I don't know what happened there. My fell apart. Can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me? So I'll continue with it. As I was saying, I'm really finding this difficult, and a lot of that is to do with the background. I think something has to change in it to bring things back into line. A lot of that is going to really be using a uniform colour to give it a bit more of a flat feel to it. So to do that, what I'm going to do is try and again these try. I'm going to try with what we see in our main feature here, which is the still lives. I try so but I will continue anyway. All right. Let me just go back to active speaker. Here we go. So as I was saying, I'm finding the background is really sort of knocking everything off track. As with all of these workshops and stuff, tend to approach each image fresh each day. And this is probably the most challenging I've done so far. So I'm going to try and make the background a little bit different, make it more uniform and opaque, and see if that helps our painting. So I've created a violet here out of blue and red and a lot of white. And I'm going to try and grey it down slightly by adding some yellow to it. A touch more red. want to create the most opaque kind of grey possible. Let's see if I start laying this in, if it helps. A lot of the thing with painting is this being able to try and rescue your painting out of a bad situation. So I'm going to now try and lay in this colour as close to the flowers as possible. Hopefully this can help save it. In a way, by putting this type of background in, what it does, it gives you the potential then to build new layers on top of the background. But it's almost like giving yourself a fresh start. Bring it in, cut it in as close to the flowers as possible. So I think I worked out what it was about the background that was knocking everything off, is because try to give it a little bit of variety and texture and stuff, but sometimes what that can do is create a sense of detail. And when you've got something that you want to highlight the detail of something, and your background has got more detail going on than the actual subject of your painting, you can end up in a bit of trouble. So this is one way I've thought of rescuing it. And then again, we can build from there. I'm also going to bring this colour down a bit, but I'm going to try and make it slightly darker. So I'm feeling now as though, whilst it's not completely rescued, I've been able to highlight areas I wanted to highlight. And that, of course, is the flowers, the vase, and the leaves. This often happens when painting. It happens to me daily. And it's about where you do you give up on the painting? Do you try and keep pushing something that you feel isn't going the right way? Or do you take those radical risks to try and redeem or solve the issue? I think with this that I should have been much more careful in the first place. I believe I added way too much tone to the background. And what's happened is we've had to sort of do a U-turn and kind of go about it a different way. Now, probably got about 15 minutes of painting left. And I'm going to try and do my best now to redeem this painting and try and get a bit more definition in there. So before we focus on the background again, we're actually putting in some of the leaves. Now, whilst they're important, there are other aspects of the painting now that I'd like to really try and bring around. And again, it's the vase. So I'm going to go back into my vase with a bit of white and try and create a few highlights. Seeing as we've got this different background now, we can try and shape it a little bit better. So I'm just adding a few white highlights here and there. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my green leaves. So I've taken some blue and I'm going to add some yellow into it. Use a touch of white as well. And again, I want to go in and look where my leaves are, and I'm focusing on shapes rather than detail. So just going looking where those shapes are coming and using your brush to create them. When working with green, it's difficult sometimes to know how to lighten it. So if you want to lighten green towards, say, a grass green, what you want to do is add yellow to it. However, if you want to make it paler, like it is in the reflection of these leaves, that's where you would add white to it. White tends to turn green into eventually it goes to kind of like a mint green colour. But you want to be a little bit careful with it to not add too much white. Just trying to get some of the green over the vase here. So it seems to be something that I've overlooked. So I can see from doing this and adding the green that this flower is not quite far over enough, but it's in now. So maybe the best bet would have been to put the background in first, have this as a flat background, and then do the painting on top. But I think it's been a good exercise to work out pretty much what not to do and how to save something. Okay, I'm just trying to add some more green to areas, and I'm going to go in and add some stalks in a minute. So when we add some little stalks here and there, I want to be using a very thin brush, or the thinnest we've got. And to make some stalks, I'm going to want to create a kind of a dark brownish colour, and looking at them from here, almost a purpley brown colour. So to do that, we will create, first of all, nice deep dark purple. Using that blue and the red. And then I'm going to add a tiny touch of yellow, which is purple's complementary, just to darken it down again. I've got this nice dark colour. Now, I don't want too much paint on my brush for it. So I've just rolled it off and made sure there's enough on the tip of the brush. And I'm going to focus first on this stalk here and just try and do a light line to start with, slightly thicker. And again, here. I think I might stop it there. I've having a very frustrating time with this painting. Everything seems to be going wrong with it today. But that's part of painting. It often happens. And I think, when I said at the beginning this would be a very challenging painting to do, I almost foresaw what was going to happen, and then fell into my own traps a little bit. But I think looking at it again, it's a sense of it being. When I saw the picture, I thought that would be amazing to paint, but a voice in my head said, "Well, what about the problem of the white flowers on the background?" White flowers are very difficult to paint. It's all depending, on the background, how the tone is set. When I normally paint with oil paints, I tend to tone my canvas this colour before I even start. It's dry, so then any colour that goes on top of it sits on top and kind of has that presence. Because worked the other way round, it was trying to get the background dark enough so as to then put the when you put the white down, that it would sit on top of it nicely. But the background had too much noise, too much going on in it, and that kind of threw me a little bit. So I was spending too much time thinking about that rather than other elements of it. But it's through these things that we learn, and I learn a great deal. The old trope about the frustrated artist. This is an insight into that, and so I still think it's a valuable thing to learn, and a lesson to see where along those stages that one can make different choices and how you can try. And often I have done in these workshops to put the car into reverse and get out of that mistake and turn it around. I think I could turn this around in a couple more hours, but don't have a couple more hours to do it in. So the takeaways from it are really think about the background, maybe tone it first, then work on top. I'd like to spend a bit more time on the vase. It's slowly coming together, and definitely the leaves. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the process, and I hope also that you learn from those mistakes I was making as well. And yes, so how did everybody get on anyway?
Silence. I enjoyed it very much, Richard. I think your flowers and vases are absolutely lovely, polished and sophisticated. What I've finished up doing is something very, very crude and in your face. But I'm working with watercolour, and I haven't allowed it to dry properly, so lots of mine has run. But it's been a super experience and a lovely, lovely subject.
Good.
Yes, I enjoyed it very much. It was a great learning curve. I wouldn't have known how to do it if I'd tried alone. So definitely a great help. And it doesn't look too bad, Richard, frankly.
Yeah, it's all right. Again, I think the difference with still lifes, and I paint a lot of my still lifes using a palette knife, in oils, and I do a lot of scraping.
Yeah.
So I'll put something down and I'm not happy with it, and I'll scrape it off. And what that does, that then adds to that character later on. It gives it that thing. What I was finding with this one is much more difficult to be physical with it, to come to a defined or refined image, just through brushes, where I'm used to sort of going through a process of creation and destruction with my still lifes. So, or doing it just in a watercolor way, because when we've done the pumpkins, that was very much, watercolor based, very thin, and the pears as well. I think here that introduction of the white into it, that's where things start going off rail a little bit. But again, it's, you know, it's something I will go back to, and I think try and do one in oils and see how that turns out, because I can be a little bit more you know, scrapey backy with it. Yes. So thank you all for coming, and it was lovely to see you all. Do send me images of your work, because I'd be very interested in seeing it and how you got on. You know, if you're going to carry on with it this afternoon, that would be really interesting to see, you know, see what happens after you refine it a bit more and take it. Because this would, I think, if I gave it another couple of hours, I could get it to a point that I'd say, yeah, that's good, that's all right.
Richard, I found, I tuned in late. Hi, everyone. And hi, it's amazing. I didn't warm to this picture initially, and because of the background, you know, but I found I've learned so much in such a short space of time. I've got to kind of blend in my background more, and then I was just watching first, and then I thought, oh, I'll do it on, you know, when you record, when you do the YouTube thing. But it was really, I've done halfway already, and it's just, you know, coming to life. Good. So thank you. And I agree with what the others said as well, actually. It's a difficult one, tricky. Yeah. But initially you don't think that, or I didn't when I looked at it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Like you said with the background, and I think you may have said what the problem is now. This is a photograph, and if you actually look at the, you know, the focus of it and the composition of it, it's photographic. It's not a painting really. And I think getting so caught up in the, you know, the lighting of the background, this, that, and the other, that's maybe where, you know, it's been difficult. Whereas most of us, the pumpkin still lifes that we done last time, those pumpkins, we got given them, and I just put them on our dining room table and took a photo of them.
I love that one.
To choose how it was lit, the composition and stuff. So I found that much easier than this. And again, that kind of strange lighting in it was really throwing me off. Because if you look at the vase, you know, normally with the vases, you'll get a shadow beneath it, but the shadow's very long, if that is the shadow of it. And it's reflecting more the shadows of the leaves. So it's kind of saying that the lighting is coming from a weird direction. But I think that it's an example of why sometimes painting from life, you know, if we were to have those flowers, say, in a studio or something, or set up, I think we'd find it much easier, because you could kind of know where your light's coming from. And
that's a really good point. And even the vase, I mean, the amount of colour you've put in the vase, you know, that's what I've really gained a lot from as well, because there's different shades of white. You don't necessarily...
Absolutely.
I think, Richard, just what you have said about had we actually seen the actual vase of flowers makes a colossal difference. There's something in a barrier in looking at it like that. Had we all been sitting in front of it, it would have been more alive.
And it's very close to us in the photograph. You know, that's the thing. Normally with a still life, you have a little bit of distance, but it's banked right up to the bottom of, you know, the bottom of the thing. Now, when we used to paint still life paintings in 1A Arts, it seems like many years. But I'd just go to the co-op down the road and grab a few pears and oranges and I think a beetroot or whatever, and some lemons, and just put them on the table, and people could choose then where they sat, you know, and it was a very loose thing. And I think those paintings always had so much more energy and life.
Right. Yes, energy and life. But this has been super. Thank you, Richard. Good. I must go now because it's gone well. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Take care. Bye.